Welcome to the Supermind Congress, where thought leaders, change makers, and folks from all walks of life are coming together to talk about the future and the way we work together to create the world that we want. Our segment today is about a sustainable future. What does that mean? How do we get there? What are our challenges and what are our pathways to create that new possibility that we are all longing for? We have with us today a special speaker, Jay Rao, who is a professor with Babson College for 25 years, an esteemed professor in his own right, serves on the board of many companies and organizations around the world and consults with those organizations. And he's a sought-after thought leader and speaker in the areas of innovation, entrepreneurship, leadership, and how we navigate this future and these uncertain times. Welcome, Jay, to Superminds Congress today. So great to have you.
Thank you, Kimberly. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you and all the leaders today.
Great. Well, I know that your topic is how crisis fuels creativity and innovation. And we are certainly standing in unprecedented times that most would say are crisis times and many layers. So your topic of how this fuels creativity and innovation is certainly timely. Tell us more about that.
So I go back to Chinese, Mandarin, and there's a term called weiji. And the word weiji in Chinese means crisis. But it's the same word that also means opportunity. Okay, and also the term crisis comes from Greek, krisis, which means it's a time to make decisions. And so crises are very fertile grounds for our creativity and imagination, because as we have seen today, this is flourishing globally. Almost nobody's not impacted by this crisis, and we are very quickly acting our way into new forms of thinking, and it is kind of just accelerated our creativity. We are all creative. It's innate in us. We're born with many of these kind of skills. It's just that we don't always get opportunities to use them, and COVID-19 has kind of thrown us into this sandbox where we all are forced to be creative and innovative.
Well, I happen to like that sandbox. So I don't like crisis, but I understand it's part of life. Yes. And I like that you are inviting us to look at the opportunity side of that equation, not stand back in fear. I know you talk about risk and uncertainty. Yeah. We're standing there trying to figure out our way through that. What can you tell us about that?
So most of us, we don't make those distinctions between risk and uncertainty. And when we kind of use the term innovation, it's a highly misused, overused buzzword, okay, especially in the last 10 years. And so we have to be very careful about that, because risk is not the same as uncertainty. And the most misused word today during this crisis is the term VUCA, V-U-C-A, okay? Probably you may have come across this term. It's existed since the 1950s, a term that kind of originated first in the military, and then NASA adopted it. And it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. But the word risk is not a part of that acronym. Okay? So fundamentally, there's a difference between risk and uncertainty. Risk is about the past. We can estimate risk. We have data. We have data from iPhone 5, 6, 7, 10, and we have a spreadsheet. And you don't have to be a genius to tell us that there's going to be another new iPhone coming, in September. So we kind of project, from our past what is to come, based on what if analysis. What if the price of oil goes to $100? What if the price of oil goes to $20? And that is risk management. But uncertainty, you don't have data. You may know what variables are important, but I don't have data, which means I can't estimate risk. Okay? And so it's unpredictable. Ambiguity is second order uncertainty, that is unknown. Okay? And so in many ways, if we don't understand this notion of risk and uncertainty, we make a lot of mistakes. For example, COVID-19 was not this enigma or this ambiguous thing that just voila one day showed up. We've had a lot of clues from the past, the SARS, the MERS, and these epidemics, Ebola, and we knew that things like this would happen, and yet we completely ignored it. So in many ways, poor risk managers are terrible uncertainty navigators. Let me explain the difference. Is we didn't manage our risk well. We didn't manage what we knew well. So countries that were much better prepared were like South Korea, and countries like New Zealand jumped in and said, hey, you know what? Let's go and see what we can learn from others, because they knew that this was coming, they anticipated it, and they managed their risk much better. And so they were able to navigate that uncertainty when it hit them. So for example, the health minister in a small state in India called Kerala, okay, she jumped on it in very early January, and she followed the WHO guidelines to kind of fight COVID-19 head on in that state. And even today, it's one of the states with the lowest number of incidents. So she was able to manage that uncertainty much better because she was a good risk manager. Mm. And so if we have to understand innovation, we have to understand the distinction between risk and uncertainty. Well, if we know how to kind of manage what we already know, and then how do we deal with the unknown when it shows up? Okay, and so innovation is about that problem solving. Okay, that happens at the heart of innovation, of all types of innovation, is problem solving, uncovering unknown variables, discovering unknown variables, okay, and managing the known variables. So that's the difference between risk, uncertainty, and ambiguity. So once we understand the structured problem solving of uncovering unknown variables, then we'll understand innovation in a much, much better fashion. And all of us, we humans, we are good at managing different things. Some of us are very good risk managers, others are much better uncertainty navigators, and others are ambiguity explorers. Scientists are great at that, ambiguity exploration. Okay? And so that's at the heart of both creativity and innovation. The thing that is common to both innovation and creativity is structured problem solving. Ask any great artist, and they have spent years trying to find their signature, their uniqueness, and they have done that through problem solving for a long time.
Well, it's exciting to hear you apply these principles to a world leader, a scientist, and an artist, because we tend to think in quadrants about who innovators are and what they do. And we often think of it as making a new product, but you're calling it solving an existing problem a creative way. Let's talk more about that. I think that is what we're all wanting to find within ourselves, and then figure out how we do that together. But you also talk about entrepreneurs. Since I'm a lifelong social entrepreneur, I think that thinking like an entrepreneur is a mindset. It is not a job description. It is definitely a mindset and a way of approaching life, as well as my task for the day. But tell us more about how this through line of thinking like an innovator and acting like one across no matter where the listener is for you today. Let's talk more about that.
So, at the heart of Babson is entrepreneurship, and we develop entrepreneurial leaders globally. And so we love and we breathe and we live for people like you. And entrepreneurs like you understand crises better than anybody else because most entrepreneurs go from crisis to crisis to crisis because you are the ones who change the world with very little resources. Any ask can impact change when you're endowed with lots of resources. But to impact change with very little resources takes amazing ingenuity, amazing creativity, amazing problem solving. Okay, and that's what entrepreneurs do. And without, whether it is a small company, medium company, or a large company, it doesn't matter. It's about finding those resources, kind of marshaling those resources to solve significant problems for society. Right? And when we are doing that, we are actually uncovering unknowns. And so the term innovation is not just limited to a chosen few Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. No, we all can do this. Innovation is very democratic. Once we kind of understand that it is structured problem solving, okay, and creativity is at the heart of that. That's the common theme. It's just we are much more now endowed, saying that yes, we can do it. Anyone can do it. Okay, and it's not always a product or a process or a business model. Problem solving is in a variety of ways. It's just that, again, the word entrepreneur is as though it is for a chosen few. It is not. We're all born entrepreneurial. Okay, but over time, unfortunately, many of us don't get to practice it. Okay? And crisis times are again very opportune moments when our human innate kind of things that are dormant in the past, our own entrepreneurial beings that were dormant in the past, flower at these moments of time. And so all of us today, we are seeing that we are progressing, we are moving, we are kind of changing. I mean, at times, not in a linear fashion. You know, we have to at times wander in order to wonder, as Langston Hughes, a very famous American poet, said, "The more I wander, the more I wonder." And so this is the natural way that humans progress.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the relationship between wandering, that you just said, which I'm familiar with, and structured problem solving. Often these things that sound like contradictions are actually the paradox we all live in. But let's talk about the one you brought in the room.
So when we have managing risk, we know that you will get a Toyota Corolla new model next year. Again, you don't have to be a genius to tell me that. That's that incremental innovation, step by step. We are building on what we already know. Okay? And without that incremental innovation, we will not have radical innovation. Okay? The more we do incremental, the radical becomes easier, in fact. Okay? And so the world moves incrementally. And radical comes now and then. It's both adaptation and mutation. Okay? So random mutation is that radical. Okay? Whereas most of the time it's incremental, which is adaptation. Okay? So we need to understand both of those. That is, again, risk and uncertainty. Right? And so once we understand how we as humans progress, we can solve problems in a much more methodical manner. It is not luck. It is not magic. Okay? The way we humans progress are usually in three ways. One is intentional. The second one is opportunistic. Or the third one is accidental. Okay? And so the thing is that we don't want to only kind of be accidental all the time in our progress or opportunistic in our progress. So the more intentional we are, the more opportunities show up. Okay? We are much more open to possibilities, which then actually, when we see it, we are able to capture those opportunities. That's what entrepreneurs do all the time. They're very opportunistic. Okay? They love to explore, identify opportunities. They kind of shape and kind of mold opportunities, and then they capture opportunities. Okay? But guess what? As Louis Pasteur said, luck favors the prepared mind. Yes. So the more intentional we are, the more opportunities open up, and the more lucky we get. So we need all of those three. So the intentionality is a little more linear, a little more structured, a little more saying, hey, I want to solve this problem. And in that journey, it's not always a straight line. It's a little more twisted, okay? But at times we may detour and land up in a place where we never expected, and that is accidental, okay? And so we need all of those three in order for us to progress. It's not one is more important than the other.
Great. Well, as we are sitting here in a very unexpected 2020, even if we know that pandemics can come and will, and other crises and drivers of, that are facing the world, as we sit here now and we want to set an intention to survive, to have a sustainable future, an intention to innovate and do things better, how do we bring these pieces together in an individual and collective way? How do we take these pieces and turn it into a pathway forward together?
Here's the bad news. We are terrible students of history, yeah, in general. Okay. And there are many reasons why we are terrible students of history. One is, for example, if you look at how Philadelphia managed the 1918 pandemic versus St. Louis managed the 1918 pandemic, you can see stark differences. The notion of social distancing and kind of sequestering is not anything new. It has happened during, for millennia, if not millennia, at least a couple of hundred years during plagues, okay? And so we've always known that's a very good way of actually limiting the spread. It's just that we totally ignore data. We ignore the past because we humans, in our wanting to be so unique, in our wanting to be so different, and the world is different, we completely ignore much of what has happened in the past. In fact, if we are much better students of history, we could have avoided a lot of the stuff that we could have avoided, probably half the deaths that have happened in the last couple of months, okay? So one is that we have to be much better students of history, okay? Unfortunately, we don't want to read today. We want to read less and less and less, and that is sad, okay? And in our obsession to be so unique, and we will always find 100 different reasons why today is different from the past. Yes, there will be differences. Yes, there will be new variables, but we can't ignore 20 or 30 other variables that actually were very similar. So we as humans, we focus so much on our differences and rather than our commonalities. So most of the time, 90% maybe commonalities, but we are so obsessed with focusing on the differences. And so we ignore the commonalities. And so we make systematic mistakes in our progress into the future. And that's where, when we say sustained growth or sustainable growth or whatever that may be, we have to be much more data-driven. We have to be much more kind of intentional. We can't ignore science. We can't ignore the nature telling us that we are messing up things, okay? And so the sad part is that many times this progress will be impeded by what I call as ideologues and politicians. Entrepreneurial leadership is different from other forms of leadership. Entrepreneurial leaders are problem solvers. They innovate their way into the future. Entrepreneurial leadership is not charismatic leadership. It is not about ideological leadership. It is not about kind of dogmatic leadership. It is not about, rah, follow me, I have the truth and the future. No, entrepreneurial leadership is structured problem solving, optimistic, data driven, opportunity driven, problem solving into the future. So we have to be very careful, because many times other forms of leadership kind of overpower entrepreneurial leadership. That's where we have to be careful about who we are listening to at this moment in time. This is the time we have to listen to experts, not opinions. Any ass can have opinions. No, we need expertise. We need to say, look, the world is doing an alt control delete. We are resetting the button, okay? We are going back to zero-based learning, which then means that we can be much more intentional about our future.
Absolutely. So as we're looking at what each of us can do to cultivate our entrepreneurial mindset and the kind of leadership, I totally agree and endorse that you can be an academic or a government official, a student, a mother. That entrepreneurial thinking is, in my opinion, also, it is about taking responsibility and proactively going toward it. It is a verb. It is a way of being in the moment and navigating. So I'm all sold on that. How do we take what each of us does individually? Because part of what we're looking at the Superminds Congress is the connection between our individual leadership and choices and coming into the collective power, which is also of great interest to me. How can we connect our dots together, Jay? How do we think about harnessing this, unleashing this, and using it for our collective good?
There's one simple way that all of us can contribute. Okay, one very, very simple way. Okay, and that is the bigger problem than pandemic is the infodemic that we have. Just the sheer amount of garbage information. Okay, fake information. And so if all of us put up our hand and say, I will not contribute to that infodemic, we are already going in the right direction. Okay.
How do we do that?
And it's each one of our responsibility. Every time we forward some garbage on WhatsApp, let's fact check it. Let's triple fact check it. And not leave it to the ideologues to make decisions for us. Let us be guided by experts with deep knowledge, with humanity, not kind of with specific gains for certain groups of people. We have to think globally. Let us not brand it as a Chinese epidemic. No, it is a global epidemic. Okay? And stop kind of pointing fingers at each other and say, look, we can play a part in containing this. How can we get people back to work faster? It is very important. And many societies have found a way to do that. And rather than trying to, success always draws suspicion. Instead, let's go and be humble about it and say, hey, how did they do it? Can we learn something from them rather than trying to say, oh, their healthcare system is different, their political system is different, their thinking. No, we always try to say, no, our things don't work. Humility is the starting point. If we are not humble and if we are not curious, then we will make a lot more mistakes. So I would say stop the infodemic before you pass on garbage to everybody on your WhatsApp or your Twitter and your Facebook or whatever that garbage you're using. Okay? And be much more curious and see and be humble about where people are solving problems in the right way. And what is it that we can copy and steal and share and legally? These are all the things we can do. And there are wonderful ways in which companies are coming together, people are coming together to solve these problems. And so in that way, I'm very optimistic that we will find faster solutions, we will find better solutions. And it's only, the ideologues who will come in our way.
Great. So I'm hearing some themes that I think are very important for us to reinforce as we bring this conversation together. First of all, you told us to look to the past and learn from it. That innovation is not just about looking to the future. It is about learning from the past and making use of that information, not ignoring it and repeating it. That's an important distinction I heard you make today, that people miss, that innovation is only looking ahead. And you connected those dots, correct?
Risk, uncertainty, past and future. You have to manage both.
Right.
If you're a bad risk manager, you'll be a terrible uncertainty navigator.
Right.
Because when that uncertainty hits, you're trying to cover your back. You're trying to point fingers. Why you were so our reactions are very different. Rather than saying, "Yeah, I anticipated this. Now let's see how we can solve the problem."
Right. You also talked about data and intention. Does that play the same role? Data is what we know. Intention is where we're going. Is that correct?
Yes. And we don't know whether the final destination may be, going, we may have to kind of navigate our way into the future. It's emergent rather than kind of predictive. The world is very emergent rather than predictive. But there's a lot we can predict because the progress of science is somewhat much more predictable. Okay? 10 years ago, we knew that LED lighting would be much more efficient. We could predict that, and we could change. We know today that solar in many parts of the world is much cheaper than any other, rather than coal or oil. We know that. And yet we will not make those changes. Okay. So we can be very intentional, but it may not be a straight line because there are political reasons, there are social reasons, there are many other variables that kind of impede our progress.
Yes. Well, as we wrap this conversation, we'll put us back in the context of today. We are in the Superminds conference, daring to acknowledge that all of us bring a super mind and a super creativity to the table, that we all have it. I heard you say that again today. We all have it. It is not for a select few. We all have it. I couldn't agree more. But as we take the crisis fueling creativity and innovation, the power of our individual and collective, and the idea that we want and need a sustainable future, what are the last words of advice you can give us as we contemplate the things that you shared with us today, Jay?
No, as I said before, without entrepreneurial leadership, there's no innovation. Okay, without entrepreneurial leadership, there are no entrepreneurs. Okay, and again, it's that it is context independent. You can be an entrepreneurial leader in a variety of different contexts, whether it is government, whether it's not-for-profit, whether it's a for-profit, large company, medium companies, it doesn't matter. It's context independent. Okay, and it is very democratic in the sense that those with a lot of resources can show us the way forward, or people with very little resources can also show us the way forward. Okay, and so in that sense, innovation is not the purview of just a select few. And time and again, We have seen that monkeys are able to beat up big gorillas, big large corporations. The David versus Goliath game is an archetype. It's there forever, and it demonstrates time and time and again that large companies make mistakes. They stumble. Small companies can take advantage of that. So with very little resources, they're way more agile. They're able to focus on the problems much better. And so what happens in good times is that we forget about the problems. We fall in love with ideas rather than problems. We misallocate budgets. We throw too much money too early. So we make systematic mistakes during good times. And during bad times, we have to prioritize better. The problem is right in our face. Okay, and we don't have the luxury to kind of wander and have fun. We need to get things done. So that's what kind of fuels our creativity and innovation. So.
Well, what's your last words of advice for today to the Superminds audience wanting to take forward some of your lessons? What's your challenge to us? What's your advice to us?
I think we all can solve the infodemic problem, but it starts with each one of us. And if we all kind of stop one per day, I can almost see a much brighter future, much faster, and say, hey, how is it that we can collectively kind of go forward? That's where I would start. You beat the pandemic by beating the infodemic.
Well, that's a great note to end on for today. A lot to think about. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your leadership. We look forward to more conversations in the future. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Oriole, for all your help. Okay.